Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from the 2024 Speed Chess Championship. This is from the semifinals. On the white end's Magnus Carlsen playing against Hans Niemann. So this is from the 5+1 time control segment. Carlsen opens with the English, ends up going for a kingside fianchetto. Notice while he's making these developing moves, the D pawn remains uncommitted. He's not so quick to play in the center with the d4. Now, why might this be the case? Well, by keeping the pawn on d2, white doesn't have to worry about any lines connected with bishop b4. This would be pointless now. It wouldn't hit with check. This is frequently an idea for black when the pawn is on d4. Black lands a check, white blocks on d2, and the bishop falls back. And that little finesse, bishop b4 to e7, at the end of it, black claims white is inconvenienced by having a piece on d2. This will hamper white in some way, hamper white's development. There's a question then, why wouldn't everyone here playing as white deploy their pieces in such an order? Well, do know that by having the pawn on d2 instead of d4, yes, bishop b4 is not an option for black. But what is an option is d4. Black can now play in the center if he wants to, grabbing space. This is not an option black chooses. He ends up going with the simple, solid, standard bishop e7. Both sides now castle, and the d pawn makes a commitment, only going one step. Now on the surface, when you see that the d pawn goes one step instead of two, you may think it's not as aggressive. But d3 actually packs some punch. d3 is a step in the direction of supporting now e4. If e4 is allowed, if white can establish a pawn on e4, right around the corner then for white is e5, an alpha 0 pawn. This can be a really strong pawn to be sure, with or without queens. We continue here with a5, knight c3. White is now ready to go with e4. Black continues here with c6. By playing c6, black in a way is saying, I'm okay allowing this pawn to get all the way up here to e5. Another move black can play here is knight to c6. This is something to definitely consider on this move 7, knight c6. In response to c6, white plays e4. If knight c6 is played, e4 would not be a good idea. What is good here is to first capture on d5 and only then play e4. These are a couple responses here for black. But the point I want to draw attention to is this one here. If white treats c6 the same way as knight c6 by playing e4, black will be for choice in a blink. By playing d4, and regardless of where this knight goes, just pick some square, black will now be able to get in e5, supporting the invasive d4 pawn. This here is a superior structure for black. Both knights are happy, both on their favorite squares. Okay, in our game, we have c6, e4, knight a6 is played here. If black tries to get the queens off, let's say we have this capture on c4, and then the queen exchange. This here is still strong, this pawn move to e5, with the idea to next put this guy on e4. Do you see what's happening here? White is coordinating with his, would be coordinating with his furthest advanced pawn. This is a huge intersection square, a hole in black's camp, the weakest square in black's camp. This here is a sign, in general, that one side is doing really well when you're able to coordinate with your furthest advanced pawn. Okay, we do not have a queen exchange in this one. This tension here remains. Knight a6, e5, knight d7. This tension, pay close attention to it. When is it released? Is now the time? It's not. Carlsen plays h4 here. If white takes at this moment here, black will not follow the general rule, taking towards the center. This would be the proper way to take. This would open the door for this light square bishop. This would also open up a square for this knight. Okay. When should the capture be played? First, it's a healthy move, h4. There's now a nice jump for either minor piece on g5. b6. Aha! Only after black has first exhausted a move, opening up a new door for the bishop. Now this is certainly the time to take on d5, right? Not quite. Still a healthy move here. Rook to e1 supporting this e5 pawn. After bishop b7, only after black has exhausted 1, 2 tempi, is this tension resolved. Now we have the capture on d5. The response here is c takes d5. Considered better is to take with the e pawn. Playing a different structure, 4 on 3 here, 4 on 3 on the king side. You can see why you wouldn't want to play like this. To be sure, as black, knight to d4 is looking pretty dangerous with knight to f5 or an e6 advance, carving out a square on e6. But this is the direction it now wants to go at this stage. Maybe this could even be an idea. But this structure right here, the move played in the game, c takes d5, the response d4, this here is a superior structure for white. In fact, you might go as far as saying this is already a won game for white. This last move cuts out any piece jump to c5. The central structure is killing multiple black pieces. These are the two that really come to mind here. The light square bishop, terrible. It'd be different if this knight could somehow get to e4. That way you could claim the bishop is having some influence in the game. It's just a tall pawn within this structure. The knight doesn't have access to its favorite square. This is a really bad position for black. The white knights in this position are perfect, both on their favorite squares. So this is a strategically won position, we might say here, for white. Let's see how he brings the full point home. What's the winning way? Black is shooting for this advance, but it's just far too slow. Having this space advantage on the king side, this is the side of the board white should be looking to play. Black should be looking to play on the queen side. Does have a completely open file to work with, but that is actually not going to be enough to cause any inconvenience to white. We follow up here with knight g5. There's a lane opened up for the queen. b5, queen h5, mate in one threat. What do you do now? In the game, it's bishop captures knight. If you end up playing h6 to prevent the mate, the knight gets out of the way, and now you always have to worry about this sacrifice on h6. Niemann's decision, swipe the knight. What just happened there? This was the good bishop being exchanged for a knight. Black now has to be extra careful on the dark squares. Follow up here is queen to e8, hinting at an f5 advance. There'd be queen tension. Carlsen plays queen g4 here. If, let's say, rook a to c1 is played, f5 is a move that says, okay, the king side's going to be a bit more shut down. You don't have time to open it up, taking en passant. You have to deal with this tension between the queens. It's true after a queen exchange here, white is still for choice, still considered winning. But Carlsen wants to keep the queens on board, recognizes that this is an idea. Let's get out of the way here. Let's keep an eye on e6 and half, let's say, put the G pawn in a pin, really close to being in a pin. Black doesn't have any time here to play with f6. That's going to leave e6 vulnerable after the e file opens up. Black's off of the G file here. Only now do we have rook a to c1, knight b6, and now a simple maneuver from here, bringing over the queen knight all the way to this h5 square. Pivots on f4, doesn't care about a2. Along the way, it just happens to watch over this possible fork. The a pawn is down for the count, but who cares? White is going all in here on these dark squares. There's not a save here for black. This is an overwhelming attack. The rook is poison. Black has to add some security over g7 here. Rook g8 is played in this position. If knight takes rook, it's going to be mate shortly after bishop f6. 3 attackers on this dark square. No good defense. It's also in a pin, so g6 wouldn't even be a move here. If you take the bishop, game over, queen g7. And if you try to babysit g7, well, you don't have enough defense for it. Chop, chop, and a mate. So this guy here is poison. In the game, rook g8. Flashy move now, knight f6, landing a fork. The knight is poison. You take the knight. White's going to be giving mate soon on g7. It shouldn't come as a great surprise that there are these tricks on the dark squares when black has given up their dark square bishop for a knight, their good bishop for a knight. These tricks are in the air on the king side, very weakened dark squares. Black continues here with queen to f8. Follow up now is queen to h5. Plenty of options here for white. You can take the bishop. You can also take on h7, saying you take my knight, game over, queen h5. All right, path chosen, queen h5, mate 1 threat. Pawn takes knight now, bishop takes, rook blocks. Now rook takes bishop, knight c4. Carlsen was thinking for maybe about 10 or so seconds at this point here, and Niemann ended up resigning before the next move could even be played. There's no one winning way forward for white, completely crushing up the exchange, basically, whenever you want to be up the exchange. If Carlsen continued at this point, maybe he was already calculating a sacrifice here on d5. This is one flashy way to continue from this position. Maybe a move Niemann didn't even want to see played here. If you don't take the bishop, it's going to get to e4, problems on h7, and if you do take the bishop, this pawn is really dangerous. If you don't take it, it's going to run all the way down to e8 with some bishop takes g7 move flicked in along the way. And if you do take the pawn, there's going to be an accident happening on e8, pinning the queen to the king. If I'm to take it out just one more move from here, knight d6, at least guarding this square. You can take the rook. Queen takes bishop. Rook takes knight. King takes bishop. There's a check. You're winning the knight next. At the end of all of these continuations, black's queen knight, this guy here, looks like he just fell out of the sky. Just some random square on a2, completely out of the ball game, nowhere close to helping defend the black king. All right, in this one, after knight c4, Niemann ended up resigning. So, what did you think of this one? Anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.